I was given one particular concept of a missile design, and I don't think he expected me to be able to do my design. So when I did it, I was excited about it. And I go to show him my work, and he took my drawing and he just marked all over. He goes, "We're not doing that. We're not going to use that." I was crushed. And that was the moment I realized this has nothing to do with my capabilities. It's because I'm a woman. And it may have been because I was a Black woman. But I decided from that point on, I was not going to let that stop me. I became the first Black cheerleader at my high school, which was a challenge. It was right about the time of integration here in the United States for schools. It was empowering for me because it was one of the opportunities where I was the first at something. They were busing children back and forth across the city. Some of the very people who were kind of the bully, we became friends because I had gone before them, so to speak. I've seen so many women with battle scars of rejection. I've seen so many women who have had to deal with being empowered and having the confidence again because they were told they couldn't, they were told they wouldn't, they were told they weren't good enough, when we know that we are. My grandmother helped start one of the first Black Girl Scouts in our city. And of course, I'm sure she ran into that situation where they didn't think that our little girls were smart enough or could do that, but she didn't let that stop her. The fact is, as long as you always show up in that room, sooner or later, you'll be seated at the table. And then I also tell women this: if they don't want to give you a seat, go build another table and invite your women friends and colleagues to come sit at your table.
Welcome to Embracing the Journey, Living Beyond Limits. Today I'm joined by Dr. Yvette Rice, founder of LLVE LLC, Ladies Living in Victory and Excellence, where she helps women build resilience, confidence, leadership, and what she calls God-empowered purpose. Her work brings together decades of experience in engineering, leadership, ministry, coaching, and personal development. But what makes this conversation so powerful is not just what Dr. Yvette has built, it's what shaped her along the way. From becoming the first Black cheerleader at her high school, to breaking barriers as a woman in engineering, to rebuilding confidence after seasons of transition, her story is about learning not to wait for permission, but to step into purpose. This is a conversation about identity, confidence, faith, empathy, and the courage to keep showing up even when the room was not necessarily built with you in mind. So step back and enjoy the conversation with Dr. Yvette Rice. Thank you for watching and listening to Embracing the Journey, Living Beyond Limits. Dr. Yvette, thank you for joining me on Embracing the Journey. I really appreciate your time this morning. It's a pleasure to connect with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation ahead and to learn a little bit more about the work that you are kind of undertaking. The first question I want to lead off with you, as I drop all my notes, was it's a good start, wasn't it? So obviously, LLVE is all based around empowering women, right? Developing confidence, leadership, and purpose. So the first question I had for you is, what part of your own journey do you think that setting up this company or forming this company and the goals behind it are really what you're really trying to speak back into in terms of empowering women in the marketplace and business and life in general?
I laugh when you say that because I feel like my entire life. Even when I was in high school and the era that I was living in at the time in the early 70s, I became the first Black cheerleader at my high school, which was a challenge. It was right about the time of integration here in the United States for schools. So that was interesting for me, but it was empowering for me because it was one of the opportunities where I was the first at something. And it prepared me for different other barriers that I would face from when I graduated from college in engineering in the early 1980s. And during that time, I dealt with the challenge of being in a group of women from the college and the university. And it was actually, I was part of an experiment, I'll say. They were trying to recruit more women into the field of engineering. And so they established a floor in a dormitory that was just for female engineers. They provided us with tutors and things to help with our background, because even back at that time, women or females were not allowed to take like auto mechanics in high school. Everybody just knew that women were supposed to take home ec. So I go into college with this area of not understanding the 3D drawings, those kind of things. But I knew I loved math, I loved science. And so that was a barrier I had to break. And I think the connection and the camaraderie that happened on that floor in that dormitory began to show me the need for what women were going to need.
So tell me a little bit about the geography, about where you are and where you grew up and what that looked like as you were going into high school.
Okay, so I'm from Decatur, Alabama. It's a small town in North Alabama. Our population now is about 50,000 people, a little bit over. We are about 25 miles from the Space and Rocket Center, the middle of everything that's going on with the Army Missile Command, that kind of thing. So, of course, the names have changed since I worked there, but it was in the South. And you have to think about during that time, there was a lot of changes happening. And I ended up going to the University of Alabama.
So in terms of high school and becoming the first cheerleader, or first black cheerleader, I think you said, what
Mhm.
was that experience about? Was that difficult for you to put yourself forward for that or to get accepted into that? Talk to me a little bit about that experience back then that you
Okay.
remember.
So I think God really set me up for that, because a couple of years before that happened, or actually my middle school years, I asked to be transferred from, with my parents' permission, out of my neighborhood school. And I actually was transported to a well, it was an elementary school that was predominantly white. I think the reason that I asked for it at the time, there was a lot happening in our neighborhood. My mother was one of those mothers who wanted to mother everybody in the neighborhood. And she really wanted the best for a lot of children. And she worked at a recreation center. So I think they saw her as this pruning woman who wanted to tell everyone what to do. And I sort of ended up being the kid that was bullied because of her mother. So I asked to be moved to a different school where I could meet different people, not realizing that it was a setup for me. The cheerleaders at that time, by the time I got to high school, the students picked the cheerleaders. Even though you had to compete, the students had a vote. Well, I had the opportunity to meet so many different children from different diversities, as far as ethnic groups, to the point that I had white friends, I had black friends, I had friends from all over the city. So I think that prepared me. Now, the first time I tried out in middle school, I didn't make it and I almost gave up. But my mother, being who she was now an educator because she went back to college and she got a degree in education. She encouraged me to try again and I made it. And so when I went to high school, of course, the same thing happened. And I felt like God was using me really as a bridge to connect the schools, because during that time it was kind of troubling. But because I had white friends and black friends, able to kind of merge friendships with both groups.
Can you just talk to me a little bit more about the reason why you wanted to transfer schools? That was middle school, correct?
No, it was actually elementary school, and then I graduated to a middle school. But the part of the situation was bullying, and I felt the need, or I don't know if I was running at the time. Bullying wasn't a big thing, but some children just didn't like me because what my mother was trying to teach them, the example she was trying to set for kids in the neighborhood. And I saw that happen to my sister in a similar way. So I thought maybe I should go to a different school.
And how did your mom react to that request? Obviously, she helped you move schools and transferred out.
My parents, they understood. And with my mother deciding to go back to college and become a teacher, she realized that I may have put myself in an advantage by changing schools. Although the schools in our neighborhood was very good school, the teachers were good, were good teachers. It gave me a different opportunity, and I got to see the world from a different eye view. And I think God was really preparing me for what was going to happen for me when I went off to high school.
Yeah. It's interesting because I did another episode with a longtime family friend of mine and their son who was also being bullied in school, and he kind of then was adamant he wouldn't go back into apart from exams or tests. So, and there's a cultural thing about sticking things out right from the olden days. I know me growing up is even I know bullying obviously is extremely serious, but there's something to be said for that, finding the right environment for you and changing the environment to bring the best out of your capabilities, right? So it's refreshing at that time and that period that you were able to recognize that, make that change. Your parents understood it. Where do you think that kind of inner strength come from to go, this isn't the right environment for me, even at a younger age, and then move on?
I think part of it was divine intervention, to be honest. You know, God knows the plans He has for our lives. And now that I look back at what I'm doing now, and even that small change from middle school, from elementary school to middle school, I think His plan was in place already.
Okay.
I really believe that.
How did the bullying affect you personally? Did that give you more resolve? Did it kind of get you to maybe hide in your room? What direction did you take? I mean, I think I know the
I
answer because you changed path, but I'm just interested as to how you reacted to the bullies and your response and where you think. I mean, obviously, God and divine intervention will be a big theme, I believe, along the way with some of the choices, but how did you react to the bullying situation?
I think it toughened me up. And what's so funny about that is thinking back when they integrated the schools and my neighborhood school was no longer predominantly Black school, and they were busing children back and forth across the city. Some of the very people who were kind of the bully, we became friends because I had gone before them, so to speak. And I knew the ropes. I knew what it felt like to be at that elementary school and going into the middle school that they had just built. I think I helped them because I had already made that transition.
Okay. So you were slightly ahead of them in terms of kind of the emotional learning of what they were going
Right.
through? Okay. Uh,
Because when we first went to the elementary school, when I did, it was probably only 10 Black students in that entire elementary school. So by the time we all um, went into middle school and that they made the integration possible, I was already prepared, I think. I knew some teachers, I knew a lot of the students. I could introduce people. I think that made a difference.
when women come to you these days through your business or through your speaking, what's the one thing that you often recognize um, in those people looking to you for help or guidance that maybe you saw in yourself when you were younger to help them?
I think the experience of something new, also the experience of being on a battlefield, I'll say, I'll use it that way, because I've seen so many women with battle scars of rejection. I've seen so many women who have had to deal with being empowered and having the confidence again because they were told they couldn't, they were told they wouldn't, they were told they weren't good enough when we know that we are.
Did you experience that in your elementary, middle school, high school? I know we talked about the cheerleading a little bit in terms of not making the team and then trying again. That seems to be something that was just in your natural resolve. But did you experience that early on?
Well, my grandmothers, both of them were very strong women, and my mother. And I think they instilled in me never to give up. My grandmother on my mother's side was not allowed to go beyond the 8th grade in school because she was a Black female. During the time it was segregation, she was in, the 50s, the 60s. In the South, it wasn't pretty. But my grandmother helped start one of the first Black Girl Scouts in our city. And of course, I'm sure she ran into that situation where they didn't think that our little girls were smart enough or could do that, but she didn't let that stop her. And my mother was very active as well. And so because I watched them and they were always my cheerleader or my encourager, the one that pushed me, and so was my dad, I think I was prepared. Now, I remember the first time that we were in a group with the cheerleaders, and one of the cheerleaders said to me, "I've never been around a lot of Black people before." And of course, it wasn't her fault. I mean, that was the culture. But the funny thing was, I said, "Well, it's going to be new for me. I haven't been around this many white people before in this close knit of a group, so it'll be okay."
Yeah, it's no, it's interesting. Um, I can't even. I have a lot of black friends, but I can't. Yeah, I. It's difficult for me to understand, the challenges and the barriers that maybe you faced. And I think it's important that you have those strong role models and influences early on to shape that, right? Did you have friends that maybe didn't have as strong parents, or in your community was that the norm, that because of the challenges that your grandmother faced, those barriers of not being allowed to go past 8th grade, was that a norm? Was that something unique to your family or your community? Talk to me a little bit about the commonality amongst that community.
No, actually, it was the norm. There were a lot of women that faced that growing up, like my grandmother. And then there were other opportunities where one of my grandmother's sisters actually graduated and went off to college, but she was younger, much younger than my grandmother. So the opportunities had changed for her. My great grandparents, they owned a farm. They had land growing up. And, but it was funny. One of my aunts said she did not realize she was poor until they went off to college. One of my mother's baby sisters, because my grandparents worked hard. They always provided for the family, and my grandmother was a seamstress. So my mother, my other aunts, they were well dressed because my grandmother could sew very well. So she said she didn't realize they were poor until they went to college on a scholarship to an historical Black college in Huntsville, about 25 miles away from here.
Yeah, it's I coach soccer predominantly for my livelihood, and I always talk to kids about comparison with somebody else that they perceive to be better, worse, whatever it may be in terms of skill development or success.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes I think that comparison culture can be really detrimental to your own personal development and your own resolve. So when you're kind of in your own lane, in your own bubble, and really secure with what you are doing on a day to day, I think that really helps in terms of your ability to move forward. Did they have challenges with that when they went to college, or was it kind of more of a humorous story that, well, there is a different world, but we're
It
pretty fine in our lane.
it was more of a story for them because they were open and excited about the opportunity to go away to college. Even though it was 25 miles from home, it was a new world for them, and they both majored in home economics. But it's funny that they ended up both working for the government, the US government, with very high, end jobs that took them to other places in the country.
In terms of what barriers your great grandparents and grandparents experienced to what you experienced, what are the similarities or differences between what they faced? Obviously, times change, we know that, but is there a lot of similarities there, or do you think we've moved along far enough? I know there's still some
Times
changes
changed
there.
tremendously, tremendously compared to where, my grandparents were and where I was. I feel like my grandparents and my parents paved the way for us because I think about it, my mom and dad had 2 daughters majoring in engineering at the University of Alabama at the same time, and I look back and I think, "How did they afford to do that for us?" But, of course, we had some scholarships, and then my parents just worked hard to make sure that we didn't have to go through what they went through. But in the middle of all of that, my mother was very smart and my dad, but my mother went back to college and she ended up getting her um, BS in elementary education. And then she went off and got her master's. And she probably would have gotten a doctorate, but her daughters were headed off to college. So I guess my dad said, "Look, I'm paying for 2, but not 3."
What did victory mean earlier in life, and um, what does it mean now, and has it changed?
I think it has changed. For me, victory early in life was to go off to college and actually graduate, do well. I was thinking about being this petroleum engineer that I never became. I graduated in petroleum engineering. The oil industry plummeted in 1982 when I graduated. So here I am thinking I'm going to be this excited, victorious petroleum engineer going to Texas, Mississippi, somewhere related to the oil industry, Louisiana, and all of a sudden the oil industry plummeted. I ended up back in Alabama, and I swore I was never coming back to Alabama. So things changed drastically for me. I was humbled by all means. And I have to admit, when I went to the University of Alabama, Alabama was football. I was there. I'm about to date myself. I was there when Bear Bryant was the head coach. Okay. So I knew the ball players. I went to the ball games. I had all of this fun, but engineering was not easy. And even though I made A's and was in the in the honor society in high school, it was a drastic change. So I had to study, and I didn't realize that until 2 years in. So victory for me became just getting through the courses and trying to catch up, which I did, and I graduated. But then the stall oil industry sent me back to Alabama. And for a year, I job hunted. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm a female, I'm an engineer, I'm automatically supposed to just step in that door. And it wasn't that way. I ended up going back to college and planning to change my curriculum to focus on mechanical engineering. And believe it or not, the first day of class, after 1 year of looking for a job, a guy comes up to me in the class and he says, "Hey, are you already an engineer?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, the government is looking for engineers. So let me bring you an application and you apply." And it's funny, I filled out the application. He turned it in for me. I didn't even type it. I used my little engineering print, turned it in. They called me the next day for an interview. That was a different kind of victory for me because I was ready to give up completely on my career. I didn't know what I was going to do. And at the time, I was actually working at a bank filing checks, nothing to do with my field. So it was very humbling for me. And then I ended up going for an interview. They hired me on the spot. In fact, they told me, listen, we're going to send you to one place. If you don't like it there, don't worry. We're going to send you to another place. We have several places that need engineers, and you'll get to choose which one you want to work in. For me, my whole life shifted at that point, and I saw victory in a different way where I finally got to walk into the doors that I thought I was purposed for forever.
Right. What do you think was the overriding reason why you continued to keep going even when you wanted to maybe give up or quit? Because at the end of the day, like we can always look at that sliding doors moment, right? In terms of, well, this happened at the time I was about to give up, but that was probably a feeling that you had for weeks or months leading up to it. What was the overriding emotion or feeling that maintained you to continue to keep going?
I think it was because there were people and rumors were out there. Well, she must not have graduated. I mean, think about it. She had an engineering degree and she can't get a job. You know, it was all of these things. And some of it was actually coming from people in my family and people around me that knew me. And I had determined in my heart and mind, I was not going to be a failure. I didn't care how long it took. I was going to get to be that engineer. And I just thought about it. I did have one professor in college to tell me, you will never be an engineer. You may as well change your major to something else. And I refused to. I think he was the driver. Now that I think about it, you ever had someone to tell you what you couldn't do? So you spent the next year proving them wrong?
I feel like I don't think I've ever really been told you can't do something. I know many people that have experienced that or have gone through that. My parents were always extremely supportive of me, and I don't know whether I ever put myself in a situation where I was or felt above my head. I think I always played safe to a degree, where
Mm-hmm.
maybe I wasn't even um, told that I wouldn't be able to achieve something because I don't think I set my heights or set my goals high enough for that. I don't know. It's an interesting question for me to delve into myself. I think. Um, I'm intrigued, and my curiosity comes back to different situations and how you interact and how you deal with things differently. So, in the bullying instance in school, even though when you're younger and maybe life is maybe a little less complicated, though it seems really complicated at the time, is you're able to pivot and direct and go a different direction. But then when you get slightly older into college and you're being told that you can't do something, or that industry looks really daunting because of the situations around it, that you then put your head down and you keep going. I'm interested in the two parallels between the social situation and then the academic situation. And is it the same driver, or is it something completely different internally wired within you?
I think part of me pursuing and not giving up was the fact that my parents had spent a lot of money and they worked hard to get me where I was as trying to become an engineer. And so because of that, I knew I couldn't disappoint them. And even when I graduated and the oil industry had plummeted, I still had to make sure that somehow they saw me as that engineer. I mean, my sister was already working in one. She was a metallurgical engineer. And then I had two younger cousins coming up behind me. And believe it or not, they both majored in engineering and they were both females. So here, my paternal grandmother had four granddaughters. We were stair steps about 2 years apart. All four of us majored in engineering in the South, which was unheard of at that time.
Yeah, I'm curious. The next question for you was always going to be about engineering. Was that because of geographic location and oil in the south? I don't really know the geography of petroleum engineering. It doesn't seem like something that I would look up as the degree of choice for me to go into. Why petroleum engineering, and why engineering, and where did that all start from?
It's funny you asked that question. I thought about that yesterday. In fact, why did I pick petroleum engineering? Well, at the time, petroleum engineering was part of the civil engineering department at the University of Alabama. And so I thought about it. If I'm going to go through all of this, civil engineers made this amount of money, petroleum engineers made this amount of money. And I thought, if I have to learn all this stuff, and I was looking at the opportunities, the things that would be so different as a petroleum engineer, I chose the petroleum. Now, when it came to engineering altogether, I loved math and science. And my uncle, my dad's brother, was an engineer. And he had gone to the military and he came back and he graduated from Tuskegee University, which is where my other two cousins graduated from. And I think the environment was kind of already set where my uncle had made that an example for us. And then my sister, who is 2.5 years older than I am. So I think that helped.
Yeah, it's environment shapes people sometimes stronger than maybe we imagine or believe. I guess it's common in a lot of places, right? Like military families generally pass that down DNA down generation to generation, and you see um, different generations. So it's interesting how you continue to chart that path, even in a difficult environment, right? You keep saying that engineering, even in the south at that time. What does that mean, like in terms of the weight and the gravity of making that decision, going to the University of Alabama, following your uncle, right? You said in terms of engineering, following the educational path of your mom, following the absolute resolve of your grandparents, and how much, I don't want to understate how difficult that could have been, or the path that you chose to do that. Can you talk to me a little bit about that kind of environment, that time, and why that was such a big step for you, for your sister, for your family?
So I think there were gaps involved. If you think about it, there weren't many females majoring in engineering. or science or in STEM in the early 70s. And I was intrigued by it. I went to a visit to the University of Alabama, and they actually had a STEM day. They were really trying to recruit females to consider being an engineer. And when I went, my sister was already there, and so I think that helped. But at the same time, seeing all of these young women excited to do something different that may be challenging for us, but it was a whole new opportunity that many of us would have never had otherwise. And I think that made the difference.
Can I
I
ask?
think the
Sorry
environment.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Can I ask why? Because you called it an experiment earlier in the conversation. Why? Why were they looking for more female engineers?
There weren't any. There was, in fact, the group that I graduated with within that probably 4 or 5 year period, there was the first female engineer that graduated from Alabama. And within that 5 year period was where we were all placed on that floor where we could get could he brace or they created a community for us. If you think about it, like I said, at the time, females were not even allowed to take like auto mechanic or anything related to building or science. And here we were, young women coming out of high school that had an opportunity to do something different. And I don't know if it was a program where they were really trying to push to get more females in the sciences and in STEM. But for me, I saw it as a challenge and an opportunity for something new. Plus, my dad didn't have any sons. So we were raised around him. We learned football, we learned sports. We watched him do things that dads do. And I think I was enticed by that.
I'm assuming you can't grow up in Alabama without loving football, though, right? Is that that's part of the culture, isn't it?
It is. And it's funny, Alabama does not have an NFL team. It's all about college and the SEC. And that was another thing I think that excited me to get to go off to the University of Alabama with Bear Bryant and football. That was exciting.
It was exciting, but you didn't really want to go back there, though, right? Is that what you told me? You were
I didn't
thinking
want to come
Texas,
back to
Mississippi.
the city that I lived in
Okay,
because it was small.
I got you.
And that was really foolish for me to think about it because there was so much opportunity for me in Huntsville, 25 miles away. I mean, if you study the demographics, the Army Missile Command, well, listen, they don't call it the Army, the Department of Defense is there. You've got NASA. NASA is there. I mean, everything that you could think about relative to technology is 25 miles from me. But
And
I think my experience was I just didn't want to live in a small city and I wanted to go somewhere different because I'd spent my life in Alabama.
and was that just to meet new people, different experiences? Was it
I
just
think so.
yeah, just something? Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I didn't want to stay where I grew up, not because there was anything necessarily that happened to me that was bad. I remember seeing movies of New York, and I'm like, I need to go and see something different for me to figure out what's out there. I guess it is a very similar experience for yourself.
I think so. And it's funny, my children ended up doing the same thing.
How
They're
many
both
children do
engineers.
you have? Two children, both
I have a
engineers.
son and a daughter. They're both engineers. One is in the auto industry. The other one is in technology related to the military.
Okay.
And neither one of them wanted to come back to the South, to Alabama, and here they are. I
Seem-
call it divine intervention.
something,
Well, and I
something.
told them if I had not been forced, I should say, the doors closed for a reason. I would not have married my husband, who I knew growing up. And I told them, you wouldn't be here.
Learn more today at live-llc.com. I'm not a faith-driven person, but I believe by having that optimistic, hopeful look to move forward, even when opportunities close, you'll find other opportunities that branch off from that. If as long as you just continue to try and move forward and stay hopeful and optimistic that something will happen, whether that's what was intended to or not. So it could be fate or divine intervention that brings you back to Alabama and your family back to Alabama. Um, but it could be a case of just seeking opportunities and pushing forward, and that's where all roads lead to is Alabama. And I've never been to Alabama, so I don't know what draws people.
And it's funny, people's view of Alabama, they think it's just a small, quaint, and they're cotton fields and cornfields, but there's so much technology here. It's mind blowing. And even when we think about faith, we still have a choice. Even if you're a person or a woman of faith, I tell the women that I work with, you still have to decide if you're going to move progressively in that faith and what you believe God is guiding you, or you can reject it. So it still comes down to us making choices, whether we're hearing God's voice as people of faith, or someone that just they still have to make a choice in life. Do I give up and quit, or do I persevere?
How
And
did those early experiences in engineering and I guess being part of an experiment of females in engineering, um, how did that shape the way that you looked at yourself in terms of a lens of confidence or competence to be able to achieve something that maybe people were rooting against you being able to achieve, or even being taken seriously in that field? Did you ever feel that you were doubted because of being female? Was there anything to do with race or gender or creed that you felt you wasn't taken seriously? Because when you told me that it's like an experiment, that to me is like it's an opportunity for you to prove someone wrong, but it's also it doesn't seem like a lot of faith was given to to you and that group of females that they would succeed. They were just trying to figure it out. I don't know if I'm misreading that terminology.
I, I think that they knew we could succeed if given the right environment and an opportunity.
Right.
I think they looked at female high school students who did well in math and science, and I believe they just wanted to give us an opportunity that may not have been there before. Now, when I graduated and I actually went to work as an engineer, I was very excited, looked forward to it, and I had a situation that happened when I first started working. During that time, in the group that I went to work with, I ran across a gentleman that I just don't think he was ready to deal with female engineers. I don't think he doubted that we could do our jobs. In fact, I felt like he may have been a little bit intimidated because of the school that I had gone to, and there was some other young women coming at the time, and we had really come in there ready to work. And we were both given a design, the gentleman was, and I was. And I'm gonna really date myself again. There was no CAD system. It was drawing, T-square, drawing board. And we both had to do a concept. And I was given one particular concept of a missile design, and he was given another. And I don't think he expected me to be able to do my design. So when I did it, I was excited about it. It was my first paid opportunity, and I go to show him my work, and he took my drawing and he just marked all over. He goes, "We're not doing that. We're not gonna use that." I was crushed, and that was the moment I realized this has nothing to do with my capabilities. It's because I'm a woman, and it may have been because I was a Black woman, but I decided from that point on, I was not gonna let that stop me. So I cleaned my drawing up, I removed all his marks, and I put it in this big drawers that they used to have to put the designs in, and I didn't say anything about it. I didn't tell my supervisor, I didn't say a word. About a week later, the organization that we were doing the work for, they decided they wanted my concept, and he knew what he had done to my drawing, and if you had seen the flush the flush look on his face, because he knew what he had done, but he didn't know that I had cleaned the drawing up. So I was a little sassy tiger at the time. I took the drawing out of my desk, and I walked over to his desk, and I slammed it down, and I just looked at him, and I walked away. And I think he realized at that point, I could have really caused him a lot of trouble, but I didn't, because I wanted him to see he was supposed to be my mentor, and I wasn't there to take his job. I was there to work with him as a team to make it better. And from that point on, his attitude toward me changed.
Yeah, it's interesting because does that still happen? Do you think these days? Not in terms of
Yes,
the
in different ways. It may
yeah.
come disguised, but right now I see it happening even with my daughter and some of her colleagues who are females in STEM.
And where do you think that stems from? Is that just an insecurity? Is that a threat, self defense type of thing, a lack of self esteem? What do you think that comes from? Because I mean that's been the story of the human race for the most part, right? Is in terms of
Yes.
people get threatened by other people that bring new ideas um, or try and evolve. Like I know there's a big issue with AI right now and how people use it to develop their ideas. Like there's a real fear um, not to embrace the technology or what it does, but um, yeah. Can I ask how did the organization you work for find your drawing to then go with your concept? Did they know it existed? Did they get to see it? Did
Oh,
you present it
right.
to them?
Well, it was 2 different concepts, and so they had seen they knew both concepts. They hadn't seen the actual drawings yet, but they knew what we were working on.
Right.
And so the team that organization was independent of us. We were kind of well, they were our client, even though they worked within the Department of Defense as well.
Okay.
And so they never knew what happened with those drawings. In fact, my supervisor never knew what that guy did to me because I didn't tell on him. I felt like this was an opportunity to just move forward. And then I felt like I had to be a tough person, this tough woman that did not allow his behavior to break me. Now, I didn't know they were going to come back and ask for that design later. I'm just glad that I cleaned it up, and I'm sure he was too.
Yeah.
When it comes to people being intimidated by other people or trying to make that other person feel bad about themselves, I always tell women this: when you understand what your purpose is and why you're on this earth, you don't have time to worry about what someone else is doing, because you know why you're here and you know what your assignment is. And if you know what your assignment is, then you can be confident in the person that you have become. And because of that, why should you try to tear down anyone else?
Yeah, there's elements of self-awareness, self-confidence in your own abilities and capability, I believe. And once you have that, you can start to deflect the noise and not let it infiltrate you as much as when you don't have a clear path forward. I feel. I feel very similar in terms of when I stepped away from my old employment, um, 2022, so like 4 years ago, and decided to become self-employed and set up my own company. You have to have a certain amount of confidence and not worry that it's going to fail to take that first step. And I think that's probably the same in any shape or form. For you to take that drawing and clean it up and not just tear it up and throw it away because someone told you it was good enough, um, that's a huge sign of self confidence, self awareness, and belief in your own capability that the work that you're doing does have purpose, right? Do you remember when you recognized what your purpose was? Was that some? I mean, you seem like you were very driven and aware from an early age, from the bullying instances in school to the cheerleading selection, and keep on going with that. Um, when do you think your purpose was clear to you?
It's funny you say that because I'm in ministry with my husband, and growing up, the denomination that we were a part of didn't believe in women ministers. So here I go again, beating down another wall. And the funny thing was, my husband wasn't anticipating that at all either. And so it was a growth moment for us, which was very interesting. And I think that everything that I have lived through and been through over life was just a culmination of the person I have become. Because here I am, I'm taking the STEM industry, of what I did as an engineer, what I do is in ministry, and I've combined all of that together with all of my experiences. And that's what created Live LLC. I never knew I would be owner of a company that uses the word of God, the professional industry to pull it together to help women build their businesses in the marketplace or to help career professionals who are females become that strong woman that they're created to be. So I think a little bit of all of my life led me to finally discovering what my purpose was.
And what was the deciding factor to create Live? I think you said, did you have you took a break away from the engineering world? Is that correct? From what I learned about you.
Yes,
Um,
I did.
so what led to that hiatus, and then what were the steps that led up to you being involved in ministry with your husband, and then in terms of creating Live and the decision to make Live? What were the steps that led into that?
So after I said, I realized I was traveling so much. And I really prayed about being able to come home and being a full-time mom. Now that took faith because I was working twice as much as my husband at the time. And it had to be a point where he really agreed with what I wanted to do as a at-home mom. But it's funny, even when I did that, when it finally happened, I started a company with a couple of friends of mine as our children got older. But we ended up dissolving the company, and I really felt a tug to go back into the marketplace. And for a woman who had been away from technology for 15 years and decide to go back, can you imagine the change in technology? And I was like, okay, God, are you sure I'm supposed to do this? Not realizing that what I was doing was kind of um, put me in a position where I could understand what other women would feel like who were at home moms or left their careers and then they had to go back when their children were older because you have to start thinking about paying for college and all these other things. And I thought about the gap and the insecurity. But my experience of going back as a program manager and seeing what women who leave the marketplace and come back, what we face, there was another part of some tools that went in my toolbox that helped me understand why Live LLC is so important.
What was the hardest part about stepping back into it? Was it the changes within the industry, or was it the changes within yourself that um, maybe the tools you had needed to be refined or developed to, I don't want to use the word catch up. I don't know if that's accurate, but technology moves a long way further forward, right? What was the hardest part about re-entering that space?
I think it was a little bit of both, but for me, it was more my confidence because here I am. I've been out of the industry 15 years, technology changed, and then I was put in a situation where I was not quite sure if I could handle it or not. The person that I was replacing as the program manager was still on the team. So that was a little uncomfortable. And then the technology was so different from what was used to or what I had experienced. And so I had to grow there. And then I had to grow in my leadership skills as well. And so getting myself to believe again, hey, you can do this. You've done it before. You survived worse things probably. You can do this. But after I stepped into that position, I realized that this time going in as a program manager of a multi-million-dollar opportunity or a contract, and I'm dealing with men who are my direct reports and women. And some of the men, unfortunately, were resistant to this female coming not as a part of the organization and being promoted, but they hired someone from the street and brought in. I think that made it a little bit more difficult in some ways. And then some people that I hired and brought in, I didn't realize that they had a problem with a women supervisor until I brought them in.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, look, it's really interesting to me to learn, right, from you, from that perspective, how you deal with that, because obviously I will probably never have those same barriers that I have to overcome. Maybe not quite the same challenges that I face. Did you feel in that situation where you have individuals that, I'm assuming that there's no real proof or knowledge that it's just because you're female or whatever, is that more of a gut instinct, or is that something that's quite clear to you that it's because of gender, or is that quite clear to you why you feel that they don't respect you in that role from the offset? And have you changed that perception of you through the work that you do, I'm assuming?
Well, it's funny, but one of the guys actually told me, you don't understand. You're a woman."
what
But I
what don't you
appreciated
understand?
his honesty, and I'm like, "So you think just because you're a man, you're smarter or your perspective is better? Why not just look at my capabilities? Look at what I brought to the table." And that person finally realized, "Okay, this woman, she knows what she's doing." And they began to work with me. But there were some I don't think even when I left to start my company, I still don't think they got it, unfortunately.
Do you think that that is you proving something to yourself, or proving to other people that you can do the job in that kind of situation?
You know, I I started looking at a person's upbringing, the culture that they were raised in, and the mentality, because I think that affects a lot about how people even respond to other people on the job or in life, period. And for me, I stopped trying to feel like I had to prove something to those people who didn't think I could. My goal was to fulfill the purpose that I had been given, be that light as a woman of faith that I'm called to be, and I stopped worrying about what other people thought. And I think that finally gave me peace to be who I am, peace to walk in the footsteps and the destiny and purpose that I have been given and that I'm walking in. And I stopped worrying about whether or not they thought I was good enough. And that's the whole goal behind what I do with Live LLC is know who you are. And I tell women all the time, know who you are, know who you're called to be. A lot of women that I work with are women of faith. Understand your purpose and assignment, and don't let anyone steal that joy of who you are and what you've been given.
Help share these stories, subscribe, like, or comment. I think most people's life where you stop worrying about the outside noise and what society places on you or expects of you, or and to follow your own values, principles, purpose, regardless of what other people maybe expect of you, right?
Yes.
But do you remember when that moment finally kind of hit you?
I think it was probably about 5, 6, 7 months in. I call it God empowered confidence because I realized I won't fail because of other people.
Right.
If I fail, it's because of my choices and whether or not I give up and whether or not I do everything I need to do to become the best at what I do. And so I went back and took some leadership classes, some certifications in leadership so that I could become a better leader. And then even with the team that I work with, I listened to them and I watched them and I saw what each of their expertise was in, and I made them the subject matter expert in that area for our organization. So everybody felt like they had a responsibility and capabilities that made them special. And once I started doing that, the team started gelling and working together because it was such a disconnect. When I first went there, I was like, my goodness, these people don't even speak to each other.
Yeah.
And I realized all they need to do is to find what their purpose is on this team, what makes them great as part of this team, and then reinforce those capabilities.
Yeah, the biggest skill I believe is lacking in a lot of children I work with, um, again in the soccer world, and I try and reinforce, even with a 4 year old, is just the core skill of listening. And I think we miss that. And I've had this conversation again multiple times. Is we do reading, writing, math, science, but there's no component of listening, I believe, in school curriculums. And I still don't quite know why that's not considered a core skill such as reading or writing, because I think what I think probably what you go into that industry back in is you realize that things have moved on and you don't know everything in that space. I think the other important thing is from the guy that wasn't respecting you or said that you don't understand because you're female. You didn't go, well, you don't understand because you're a man. You tried to understand by kind of trying to figure out what his point of view was, I guess, or what environment he's growing up in, and the angle that he's coming from. Doesn't make it right or wrong necessarily, but I think that helps you in terms of your decision making or your understanding of the people that you're working with, and that will then help build your knowledge base to fill those gaps. So I think just listening and understanding somebody else's story is something that I still don't. I put it now at the forefront of everything that I do with youth soccer players. Is you need to develop the skill of listening first, not to me as the coach, but to your teammates, to your parents. That's number one, because if you do that, you can then develop all the other skills a lot quicker. In my humble opinion, and I think that that stands out not just from finding purpose, um, but then also being able to bring other people together. You need to actually listen to people, right? Is that something that you encounter with young females that you work with Live, or within the industries that you place?
Absolutely. In fact, when I went back and got my MBA at 59 years old, here I am going back to college again, and I was in the Jack Welch Leadership Institute, part of Strayer University. It's something one of his classes that he talks about is voice and dignity. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten that and what it means to give a person voice and to respect them and treat them with dignity. And I think that is one of the biggest things that has to happen as a leader to be a good leader. And unfortunately, when it comes to our children, even growing up, because of all the technology, and we're walking around with headphones all the time, they don't know how to communicate with others and to listen. I think that social media has given people a platform to say words that they don't have to be accountable for, unfortunately. And so I think that has fed into industry, how we treat people in the workplace, how we treat our direct reports, and how we treat other people as leaders, business owners. I think it has affected the way we communicate with people. But I also think that it has allowed us to become bullies in a sense where we won't listen or take the time to put ourselves in other people's shoes to see why are they acting like this or what is the reason behind the way they think.
So this is an opportunity, right? In terms of
Yes.
how to change that. It's kind of not my intent behind this podcast or the work that I'm doing, but it's definitely something as I have more conversations with people, um, the opportunities to connect with more people, to hear more voices, to learn of the commonalities between people's stories, because I think everything that you speak about today comes from a very different place than what I grew up with. But
Mhm.
the themes and the pillars of what we endure and suffer, and the challenge and the self doubt, and um, certain challenges that we face and how we overcome them by having purpose, by having empathy, by having respect, by giving a voice to others, to build connection around us, I think creates a better society um, that we can live in, and be proud to live in as well. So I think that's important. Couple of
Something that you said, that one word, empathy, is so key. And I think it's important to us, even as people who have to bounce back from things we may have faced. We still have to show empathy to the person who may have been the center of the reason why we had to be resilient.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've learned over time.
What do you think the key is to rebuilding the momentum that maybe you lose? So, for example, like for you, you lost momentum, not in a negative way, but lost momentum because you stepped out of the industry for 15-year period, and then had to reestablish yourself and go in. It could be the same if you get knocked down or get rejected for job applications, and you have to dust yourself off and rebuild momentum. I experienced it when I was in college. I suffered, certain anxieties or maybe minor depression, and it took me years to come out of that cycle and rebuild momentum. It took me to travel from England to travel around America to start to rebuild my momentum towards my purpose.
Mhm.
What do you think of the steps are to helping you rebuild momentum maybe faster or earlier on in your life experiences than maybe waiting for that moment at 30, 40, 50 years of age when you've gone through those life experiences?
I think it has a lot to do with understanding your why. Why am I here? Why have I made the choices that I'm making? What is the reason and the purpose behind me being where I am right now? And like you were talking about, when you understand that why and that purpose, you don't wait for permission from other people to approve it. You don't wait for permission. As long as you know, and it's like for me as a woman of faith, I know I'm in the will of God. Other people may not understand my why, but as long as I know the why and the purpose behind it, then I'm going to press on. And of course, with anything that we face in life, you're going to have obstacles. Some obstacles are put there to grow you up or to mature you in the area. Some obstacles may be put there because there's a door that you don't need to go through and it's protection. And then there are other obstacles that may be put there to kind of redirect where you're going to help you develop to become the person that you need to be for the opportunities that are coming down the road. But in all, it's all about understanding the purpose, your why, and not waiting for permission from people from the outside that don't know your why or understand your why.
Last couple of questions for you. Um, you found a way to kind of merge all these different pieces together. Um, I actually see a mirror in you and me in terms of my coaching, the podcast, other work that I'm doing is like I'm drawing on all these experiences and maybe trying to bring them into one central place. And you're doing something. I think you went on a much broader educational background than I than I did. Um, well, what changed in how you felt when you kind of brought these pieces together or made sense of all these kind of pieces of the mosaic coming together and how they connect, and how those paths all kind of weave into one. What did you feel anything different when you started to make sense of all those pieces?
It was like the light bulb came on. I have a peace now. Even when there's a struggle or I'm facing something that's difficult, because I know I'm where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, there's a peace that I did not feel years ago when I was going through the process. You know, I'm about to date myself again. I'm in my 60s. And I look back and I wonder, what if I had found all of this in my 40s or 50s would things have been better? But then I think about it, I would have missed part of the process that got me here because some part of my story, another woman is going to need. So even with all of the things that I've lived through, been through, I think it's a culmination of who I am now. But I think my story will help other women with similar stories, whether they're younger coming up or they're in the place where I am right now and they're still trying to figure out their why. It's not too late. But I just have a peace now that I didn't have before.
What do you think women most need to hear now, when they're maybe capable but not confident enough in their own why or their own purpose? What do you think is the biggest thing that you tell those? Uh, I mean, I guess it doesn't just have to be women; it's women in your industry, but in terms of people in general, when they feel capable, when they are capable, maybe don't understand that they're capable, but are less confident. What's the thing that you feel they most need to hear?
Change the language that you're speaking to yourself. I mean, if you think about it, we hear ourselves talk more than anyone else. So even when you're thinking, you're still hearing your voice. And the more negativity, self-doubt that you speak to yourself and that you're listening and hearing, the more difficult it becomes to really build your confidence up in who you are and who you're created to be. And so even if you have to start writing notes and taping them on the mirror, I have a confession that I give to women in the marketplace. And I tell them, put it on your mirror in the morning. Begin to speak that to yourself. You know, as a woman of faith, we speak life and we speak the word of God and the promises of God and the uniqueness about us, how we are created. And every one of us has something different to bring to the table. In fact, I tell them all the time, look at your handprints. No one has your handprints but you. No one has your fingerprints. So the mark you leave on the earth is your personal mark. But you've got to tell yourself that you're capable and you put here for a reason, and go do what you do best.
How do you help individuals, young women, um, hold on to that positive outlook without pretending that the barriers don't exist? Because they do still exist, right? In certain industries, I can only assume that they're getting easier, or I don't know, easy is the right word, but there, there's maybe, I don't know. You you can probably educate me on the best language to use for that, but there are barriers that still exist in certain genders, creeds,
Right.
races. How do you advise or help people hold on to that positive framework when I guess you probably know they're going to hit those barriers at some point, and they're
Right.
going to need to stay hopeful and optimistic and positive to be able to navigate that barrier. What's the advice that you give to those young women?
I mean, I look around now what women have faced in the marketplace. So many, there are hundreds of thousands of women who have lost their jobs recently here in our nation. And we can't ignore the barriers, but you have to choose not to allow the barriers to stop you. I tell people that what's meant for you is for you, no matter what people try to do to stop it from happening. The only someone that can destroy or stop what's supposed to happen for you if you, and that's if you quit. So although the barriers are there in the training and the classes that I teach and prepare and coach the women in, is this, that they have choices to make. We can give up and quit, or we can persevere. Now, what do we need to do to persevere? As women of faith in the Word of God, we find scriptures or situations that are similar to our lives, and we look at what that person did to persevere. And you can even do that whether you read in the Bible or someone's story, someone else's life story. The fact is, as long as you always show up in that room, sooner or later, you'll be seated at the table. And then I also tell women this, if they don't want to give you a seat, go build another table and invite your women friends and colleagues to come sit at your table.
My last question for you, Dr. Yvette, is if you had to go back and talk to your 10-year-old self, what would you tell that version of yourself today?
I tell that version of myself one thing probably. When you go off to college, don't play your first 2 years. But other than that, I think I would tell myself to love everybody, try to put yourself in their shoes and understand why they think the way they think. And just be proud of who you are on the inside and the outside. And don't let anyone tell you you can't do it, because you can.
My thanks again to Dr. Yvette Rice for joining me on Embracing the Journey, Living Beyond Limits. What stood out to me most in this conversation was the idea that purpose is not always discovered in one clear moment. Sometimes it is built through every challenge, every closed door, every uncomfortable room, and every season where we have to remind ourselves who we are. Dr. Yvette's story teaches us that confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to keep moving forward with clarity, faith, and self-belief, even when others question your place at the table. We talked about barriers, but we also talked about choice. The choice to persevere, the choice to listen, the choice to lead with empathy, and the choice to change the language we speak to ourselves. And maybe the lesson that stays with me most is this: if someone will not give you a seat at the table, you still have the power to build another one and invite others to sit with you. So thank you for listening, and as always, I hope this conversation helps you embrace your own journey with a little more courage, perspective, and purpose.